Canada goes to vote in an election shadowed by Trump. A Canadian election that was supposed to be about turning the page after 10 years of Justin Trudeau is now about something altogether different. On Monday, Canadians vote in an election transformed by their most conspicuous neighbor to the south. At the start of the year, it seemed a foregone conclusion that time was up for the center-left Liberals, who had been in power for a decade under increasingly unpopular Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Their rival Conservatives commanded a double-digit lead in the polls, buoyed by widespread public frustrations over Trudeau's tenure, inflation, and steep housing costs in a country that saw political polarization in the fractious wake of the pandemic. Then, President Donald Trump showed up on the scene. His threats and later implementation of damaging 25% tariffs on many goods from Canada hurt ordinary Canadians and provoked retaliatory measures. His constant belittling of Canada as the 51st state bewildered and infuriated Canadians. In scenes that belied decades of fraternal bonhomie and spoke of the feelings of anger and betrayal up north, Canadian hockey fans booed the U.S. anthem in NHL arenas across the country. Amid a surge of nationalist sentiment, Trudeau decided to bow out and triggered a Liberal Party leadership contest that saw the victory of Mark Carney, the suave former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England. Carney picked up the baton relinquished by Trudeau, amplifying warnings about the peril posed by Trump and vowing to champion Canada's interests through a clash it never wanted. Sensing a change in the political winds, he called an early election. Canada's old relationship with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over, the new Prime Minister declared. Trump was bent on wrecking Canada's economy, he warned. And at a news conference Thursday, Carney told reporters that Trump has not abandoned his quixotic dreams of Canada as the U.S.'s 51st state. He added, "Carney, to be clear, as I've said to anyone who's raised this issue in private or in public, including the president, it will never happen." An election that was supposed to be about turning the page after 10 years of Trudeau is now about something altogether different. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, had positioned himself as the consummate candidate for change, bent on deregulating aspects of the Canadian economy and whittling away at a tired, woke liberal establishment. But while such echoes of Trump may once have simply reflected the animus of an increasingly illiberal moment in Western politics, they could prove politically toxic this year in Canada. At one point during the campaign, 56% of Canadians told us the most important ballot question was, which party is best able to deal with Donald Trump's threats to Canada? David Coletto, founder and CEO of polling firm Abacus Data, wrote in a Toronto Star op-ed. That number has since shifted slightly, with a growing share now returning to the time for a change frame. But even among those voters, 1 in 4 say they're supporting the Liberals, an indication that Carney has done enough to distance himself from the Trudeau years and offer a new Liberal option that satisfies a chunk of the change-seeking electorate. Even in French-speaking Quebec, a province that has long harbored its own independence aspirations, voters have clamored for Canadian leadership that would stand up to Trump. By last week, it seemed the election was now the Liberals to lose, an astonishing shift from just months prior, when the party seemed on the brink of a historic wipeout. Both Carney and Poilievre have cloaked themselves in a newfound Canadian nationalism. In a campaign where there are differences on topics such as climate change and crime, there are few divergences among the top contenders on some broad points in how to respond, at least on this key front, my colleague Amanda Coletta explained. Carney and Poilievre backed targeted retaliatory tariffs, reducing interprovincial trade barriers, and taking steps to build Canada's economic resiliency so it can reduce its reliance on the U.S., all of which will not be easy and involve difficult choices and trade-offs. Poilievre entered Parliament in Ottawa 2 decades ago as a precocious 25-year-old. He evolved into a populist pugilist who won his party's 2022 leadership vote in a landslide. He appealed to myriad Canadians exhausted by pandemic-era mandates and the airy moralism of Trudeau's government, which had to stave off several scandals and struggles. He pitched small government, tax cuts and deregulation, and made a boots-not-suits push for blue-collar voters, Coletta wrote of Poilievre. He bashed the government over inflation, rising interest rates and high housing costs, tapping into fatigue with Trudeau to build a seemingly unbeatable lead. Canada, he said, is broken. But the politics of 2024 are not those of 2025, and Canadian pride has flared in the face of Trump's bullying. Moreover, the White House's broader efforts to consolidate executive power, intimidate the courts, purge federal government, and bend the U.S. system in its favor have alarmed Canadians. We are getting an up-close view of an early-stage illiberal democracy in action, wrote Globe and Mail columnist Gary Mason. Yes, there have been some Trumpian overtones in some of Pierre Poilievre's rhetoric and tactics up to and during this federal election campaign, but nothing quite as unnerving and appalling as what we are seeing in the U.S., he added.
Check one, check.
But the shadow of Trump has undoubtedly hurt Poilievre. It's like you've spent 3 years studying one subject for a test and then somebody changed the subject and the test. Andrew McDougall, the former communications director for the last Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper, told the Washington Post. But that's life in politics. Sometimes the world changes and you've got to change with it.